pressure of the French company on the French government, because, as it was explained before, the French government stopped French company investing in Iran. They try to impeach them to build ties with Iranian counterparts during the time of sanction since 2005, 2006. So it was 10 years of very difficult relationship. So I think everyone has the interest to go forward now and to turn this page. But I think that the French president will play a key role, not Laurent Fabius. Because I think that François Hollande is very pragmatic, like Hassan Rouhani, and we can be hopeful that in the future, also for the Middle East stability, France and Iran could cooperate against the rise of ISIS, Daesh, and in Lebanon, because for France, the relationship with Iran is very important, given the special relationship between France and Lebanon. And France was always very pragmatic in this relationship with Hezbollah. So we have a different position than the US one regarding Lebanon. And I think that can be an asset in the French-Iranian relationship in the near future.
Ali, do you think Paris has lost faith over this?
No, I don't think so. I think the gentleman's correct that this was an American-led effort, and I think the Gulf countries appreciate that France has tremendous commercial potential interests in Iran, and Iran is a big market. And I think they would like to encourage France to engage with Iran. You know, as America somewhat retreats from the Gulf, which is what everybody is concerned about, for the great powers like France and Britain to get more involved and engage Iran more can only help. As I said, we are pessimistic about sort of the path that Iran will take, but assuming that Iran is going to focus inward, any economic engagement between France and Iran will be welcomed, really. I don't think anybody wants to put Iran in a box economically.
Henri, French car makers, as you were saying beforehand, Renault and Peugeot were major players and still are to a degree in Iran's car market. Now, trade-wise, what is actually up for grabs, given the fact that obviously since 2011 the situation has deteriorated considerably for French people and their investments in Iran?
We have to keep in mind that France, not like US or Great Britain, kept stable relations with Iran. They barely did not close their embassy except for several months in the 80s. But we always had good companies there, good business, except until from 2011. France has a good image in Iran because of the cultural, also the cultural ties we had since a long time with Iran, especially with French products like French cars and
Airbus is another one.
But the thing is now, the main issue is what is the size of the slice France will get. Will France have the bigger part of the slice or US?
Do you think so?
I think the issues are being played now, but I think we should have a good one because let's talk about the field of the sustainable technology. Iran has a real catch-up, a real gap in the sustainable technology. We have to keep in mind that 2 out of 10, the most polluted cities in the world are Iranian, and the top one is Ahvaz. So there is a real problem with waste management, with water management, and infrastructures. So France are the leaders in this field, like Veolia, like Suez Environnement, like GDF Suez. So they can grab this this part of the market. Vice President in charge of environment came in France in last February and said that Iran has almost 250 billion to invest in oil and gas infrastructures, but also in waste management. So this is one of the gold mine for French companies. This is the sustainable technology.
So in terms of, are we talking about billions of euros of worth of trade? And I mean, and this, given that this country has a sagging economy, I imagine there's a lot of interest in reigniting trade ties and trade deals with Tehran.
Thing is, rising sanction takes time. There's the US sanctions, there's the UN sanctions, there is the European Union sanctions. So this takes time for Iran to come back to the SWIFT system, the international payment system. For the moment, for this very moment, French banks are really scared because of the BNP Paribas affair, which they take more than almost $9 billion
of
penalties. So all these will get open maybe in 2016. But one of the main issues is to rebuild the network. Because since Ahmadinejad, this administration, step by step, French companies left, foreign company left, French and international intermediaries left too. So who makes what in Iran, who is who? So this is one of the main issues that French state, Laurent Fabius and Deputy Secretary of State needs to help French companies, because the race has started. We can see that since Sigmar Gabriel's in charge of economy, the vice president of Germany, went to Iran last week, because Germany lost almost a half of its export, passing for $5 to $2.5 billion.
Now, just coming back to what you're saying about, the importance of French trade and the fact that there's still a sort of, a latent sympathy for the French, if you like. But even the CEO of Peugeot Citroën says that his company's talks on a manufacturing venture with Iran's biggest car maker are being undermined by anti-French sentiment that still exists in the country, Clément.
At the time, I was in Iran in 2007 when French Minister Bernard Kouchner threatened to attack Iran. And there was a strong popular reaction against this new French policy regarding Iran. So I think, yes, there is a memory, but as I said, I do not believe that the French Foreign Minister of France is 100% neoconservative like George W. Bush. So I think that these people are very pragmatic, and we are not a great power like the US. So as a medium power, we should find a compromise with Iran. And I think the new president, Hassan Rouhani, is an asset also for this pragmatic side of French policy. But still, there is a recent memory, and there are hostages, French hostages in Iran also very recently. So I think that, yes, there is a very difficult path to address, and this is a very sensitive issue on both sides. I think not only because we are speaking on the Iranian side, but in the French side also, there is a lot of tension, and this new policy is not an easy one, because also there is a lobbying of Israel, Saudi Arabia, the same phenomenon in the US, because now Obama has to sell the deal to the US Congress. So I do not believe that even in the political sphere in France, there is a support for the deal. But there is no support for the Islamic Republic of Iran. So it's not because we have a new relationship, a normalized diplomatic relationship. It's not the same as a reconciliation. It's a cold peace. So we do not think that we are the best friend of Iran right now. This is not true at all. I think that the restarting of the economic cooperation can be an asset to improve the relation, but we are starting from a very low level, I think.
Yes, when we talk to French diplomats, always said, when we're talking behind doors with them, that they did not trust the Islamic Republic. We don't have to forget that in the 80s, Laurent Fabius was prime minister while there was all this Lebanese crisis, hostages crisis in the 80s, all the bombing in Paris, and Iran, through Hezbollah, was involved in these bombings. So that's part of, I think, the mistrust. These days, if we go back to the economical issue, these days, of course, like when you talk to normal Iranian, they're quite upset about Laurent Fabius. We don't have to forget that they were calling him like the little Satan, little devil, because of his tough positions. Iranian people, especially young people, do not understand why while they were buying lots and lots of Peugeots, suddenly from one day to another, France left the market, and they were not having like separate materials
or replacement parts.
Replacement parts, yes, to make the car work. So I think it would take a long time. But as I told you before, Iranian people are very, very open to the world, and they know that and they like French materials too. So.
But Iranian hardliners have been wanting to block French business deals because of France's very close relationship with the Gulf states, and which of course are locked in a regional power struggle with Tehran.
I think it's gestures. It's not in their interest to do that, to do so. Because they've always been saying, like in the last month, Fabius is the representative of Israel and Saudi Arabia on the table of negotiations. On one hand, it's completely false, but on the other hand, we don't have to forget that when I talked, I remember to Steinitz, which is one of the most famous Israeli ministers, that's saying that was very happy about the fact that France's position was the closest to Israel in these negotiations. And we all know that Israel did not want that deal. So I think that's something that stays in the Iranian memories, but that won't, it wouldn't be a problem for the companies to go back to Iran.
Ali, what do you say in terms of what Armin's just been talking about?
Look, it's all going to depend on what Iran does. This whole euphoria about an economic opening is going to take time, because Iran as an economy is going to take time to open up. So really what we're going to be seeing for the next 2 years is more a question of how France will react to Iran's behavior in the Middle East. And I think that's what people in the Gulf and in Saudi Arabia are going to judge France on. Not whether Mr. Fabius goes and has a positive meeting or President Rouhani is invited to France. They're going to look at how France reacts to Iran's behavior in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen. And I don't think that, I think people are pretty comfortable in the Gulf and in Saudi Arabia that France has a very sophisticated understanding of what Iran is up to, and that it can be a positive influence. So I don't see that these visits causing tremendous amount of concern, really.
I mean...
Yeah, but I think it will be like most interesting and more important things. How will Iran use this deal for the Middle East, for all the crises in the regions?
Because as I was saying, there are many in Iran who, I mean, they talk about Laurent Fabius being Israel's lackey, but also being the lackey of the Saudis in the Gulf states.
Well, we feel that today France has put all its eggs in the same ballots, which is the Sunni Saudi ballots. And I think France would have gained to have a more balanced policy in the Middle East. I'm not saying that Saudi nor Iran is the devil, but I would say that the main crisis in the region is the Sunni Shia, and on the Sunni side you have Saudi Arabia, on the Shia side you have Iran, and these two countries are just fighting with each other through proxies in Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq, and in Bahrain also. So I think that Obama has understood that, and he has said that isolating Iran will not work, and it was Bush's policy, and it was a big fail. So on that side, of course, like everybody, especially Saudis, fear that Iran could use all this money that it took back from the sanctions to give more support to Bashar al-Assad, to the Houthis in Yemen, to Hezbollah, to Hamas, and all his proxies in the region. But one thing is sure. Regarding, for example, to the war, regarding war with the Islamic State, it's a shame that Iran is not actually part of the coalition against the Islamic State in Iran, whereas on the ground, on the field, Iran is the first foreign countries. So I think that every country in the region, and especially Western countries and the Arab countries, will gain if if there is a cooperation between Saudis and Iranians. The main issue is, do these two countries really want that or not? And that's another question.
Ali, you're wanting to contribute?
Yes, I mean, it's not a question of whether the two countries want it or not. Iran is sort of in an expansionist role, and Saudi Arabia is in a defensive role. So it's Iran that has its troops in Iraq, in Syria, and is getting involved in Yemen, which is in Saudi Arabia's backyard. So I don't think really it's a sort of an equal competition. Saudi Arabia is a sort of a status quo power, and Iran is in a way a revolutionary power. Iran today controls a good part of Iraq, is really the controlling foreign power in Syria.
I'm just asking you.
Influential in Yemen.
Yeah, I'm asking you, who's buying like all the Western weapons these days? Is it Iran or is it Saudi Arabia? Who has all the American bases around its country? Is it Iran or is it Saudi Arabia? Who is part of GCC and NATO or Saudi Arabia is not for NATO, but Iran is not part of any cooperation alliance in the region. I don't mean that Iran is not interfering in other countries' affairs, but I think we would gain to have like a more balanced vision, because in Iran, no one in Iran has forgotten this tragic 8 years of war by Saddam Hussein, where Iran was alone, totally alone, against Saddam Hussein, with the support of Saudis, Sunni countries, and all the Western world. So I think that's something very important in the mind of people, especially the Revolutionary Guards today in Iran. And
well, if I could just add a comment here. I mean, when we talk about the Iran-Iraq war, Saddam Hussein didn't attack Iran out of the blue. He attacked Iran as a result of Iranian ambitions to export its revolution. If you remember, after Iran, the Shah was overthrown, the Iranian government was totally focused on exporting its revolution into the surrounding countries.
No, I do remember.
And
but
so
he's the one who actually invaded.
Let me just finish my point.
Yeah.
When you talk about who's buying arms, absolutely, the Saudis and the Gulf countries are buying arms to protect themselves because they're worried and they're
France
concerned.
and the US are selling to them. That's very interesting.
Iran
exactly.
Iran is buying weapons to Russia and China. So I think this is endless debate. So there is no point. But I think regarding the Gulf states, there is a difference of point of view among the Gulf states. We cannot say the Gulf states. I think Saudi Arabia is one position, but Qatar and Dubai, for instance, wants to have good relations with Iran, and they can't also have taking benefits from a new relationship between Iran and the world, because Dubai can increase trade with Iran, for instance. So I think that is oversimplified to say that there is a war between Shia and Sunni in the Middle East with Saudi Arabia and Iran behind. It's more complex than that, and I think that we have to be very careful when we address this issue from the West also, because I think that there is many people in Iran who wants to improve the relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia. I'm thinking about President Rouhani, who was very important in the rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia in the mid-90s. So this happened before also. I think the main problem between Iran and Saudi Arabia is the competing dimension of their relationship regarding the oil market, because the return of Iran into the world community will mean for Saudi Arabia to have a very strong competitor in the oil market. Because if Iran increases oil production, that can challenge the swing producer status of Saudi Arabia. And this is more important than the Shia-Sunni sectarian divide, I think. But once again, Iran is not...
It all comes back to oil, Clément.
Not only oil, but it's just that religious factor are one dimension. But there is many different dimensions, and it's really...
No, but I mean, if I can make a point
here,
I think the important dimension is Iranian expansion, military and political expansion outside her borders. Iran's coming into the oil market will add 1 million barrels.
Yes, but the Saudis...
1 million barrels over the next year, and it's going to take Iran a decade to build up its oil industry
so long-term
to a level where it can be.
Yes, I fully agree on that.
Yes,
okay, we can't all speak at once, so just hang on one at a time.
I totally agree with you, sir. But on the same hand,
really.
but on the same hand, who is like supporting these days the Jaish al-Fatah, so which is the army of conquest, which is led by Al-Qaeda in Syria, which is al-Nusra in Syria against Bashar al-Assad? It's Saudi Arabia, it's Qatar, it's Turkey. So I think the two countries have responsibilities in interfering in other countries' situation. That is a point. But I think
Iran is perceived as an hegemonic power by its neighbors. This is a matter of fact. So I don't want to fall in the Saudi discourse, but if you go to Afghanistan, if you go to Pakistan, if you go to Iraq, even Iraq, it's a part of Iraq, in the Sunni region of Iraq, you have people there on the ground at a popular level. They do not like the Islamic Republic of Iran. They do not appreciate what the Revolutionary Guard are doing there. So we have to take this perception into account too, because the only country in the world where Iran is popular is Pakistan, where the majority of the population of Pakistan has a positive view of Iran. But if you go to the Middle East now, you go as a rating.
Yes,
if you look at the survey, so this is not a Saudi plot theory. It's not a conspiracy theory. This is a fact. So I think that Iran as a state policy is a strong regional power. We have to address this issue, but also I think that Iran has to normalize its position as it has been done now with the nuclear issue. I think the regional policy of Iran Iran have to improve, and the reconciliation with Saudi Arabia is the key, I think.
Okay, very quickly, because we're going to have to wrap up very soon. Henri, you have something to say?
Yes. First of all, there is no gap between Iran and Gulf states, the mini Gulf states. Sheikh Tamim, at the first agreement in 2013, the one who was postponed, welcomed this one. Dubai is the economical capital of the Islamic Republic, so they need to trade between each other. As Armin stated, the weight of the Iran-Iraq war is really high, and the youth doesn't want to be read all their lives. So what we need to do is the key is the trade, because this new generation, when they will come to power, when the supreme leader will change, when there will be new president, maybe Mohammad Javad Zarif, which is very popular, this will change step by step. But what we need to do now is to normalize relation with Iran, because we need Iran is a strong state, and we need it when we see 3 states in Iraq and Syria falling.
I know, Armin, you want to sort of say something, but unfortunately we have run out of time. I'm terribly sorry. So let me thank my guests.